I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, the Housing and Land Use Committee. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kirk, can you please do the roll call for us, please?
Councilmember Sandoval, Councilmember Salazar, Chair Barajas.
Present. And let the record reflect that Councilmember Sandoval and Councilmember Sandoval both provided notice that they would not be able to join us today. With that, we do not have quorum, so we will not be taking action on the consent agenda. So ID number 26-043, the minutes from the January 20th, 2026 meeting are continued to the March meeting. And that being said, we'll go ahead and take public comment on items not on today's agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city of Salinas. Are there anyone that wishes to make public comment? Seeing none in person, anyone online?
No.
Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close general public comment. We are skipping consent, as mentioned. The minutes will be continued to the March meeting. And we will move into our administrative reports. ID number 26-046, an update on pre-development activities for 34, 36, 38, 40, 37 to 39, and 45 Soledad Street in Chinatown. And we have Mr. Leonard giving the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair. Pleasure to be here and to give an update on the city's activities for redeveloping 34, 36, 38, and 40 Soledad Street, which is one property, 37, 39, which is also one property, and 45 Soledad Street. Next slide.
It's not.
So here's the agenda for today. We'll have a number of slides, actually, but we'll move quickly through them. And we'll focus on background and some of the design precedents that we looked at with our architects. And then we'll do a review of each individual project site, and then an overview on timing and schedule. Next slide. So this work is being done under the Chinatown Revitalization, which the city has been working to revitalize Chinatown for a few decades now. The most recent iteration is the 2019 Chinatown Revitalization Plan. And Chinatown was historically a vibrant community. Waves of various immigration waves moved through there, starting with the Chinese in the 1800s, and then the Japanese, the Filipinos, and finally the Mexican immigration. But over the years, it became subject to blight and isolation, and the revitalization plan is intended to bring the neighborhood back to its former glory. And so we're looking to focus on safety and homelessness, infrastructure improvements for the streets, the sidewalks, other critical infrastructure, economic development, bring the businesses back to the community, and then provide more housing opportunities within Chinatown. Next step. So this project really aims to advance several of those, primarily through the purchase of vacant properties. 45 was purchased by the city following a fire in the mid-2010s. 34 through 40 was purchased more recently, and 37 and 39 were the last of the project sites to be purchased. And that's the site of the Republic Cafe, which was quite a famous restaurant in Chinatown and is a cornerstone of the Chinatown Revitalization Plan, bringing that back as a cultural museum. And then in 2024, we were successful in applying for and receiving approximately $1.5 million in funding to do pre-development work through the Regional Early Action Planning Grant. And with that funds, we selected TEF Design and Architecture to do design work and entitlement work for the three sites. They were selected both for their experience working with the city on several projects, but also for their rich experience with historic architecture and working in disadvantaged communities. Next slide. Here's an aerial of the project location. So on the left-hand side is the west side of Soledad Street, where 34 to 40 are located. 34 and 36 were both one-story buildings. One was formerly the PI Market. Both of those buildings were demolished last year following a fire. 38 was a historic two-story building with the Ayers Pool Hall. It was eligible for historic registration, however, it was demolished after a fire in 2025. Number 40 was a formerly a gas station, but long time an empty lot. And again, those addresses are combined into one actual parcel. So it's a little confusing, multiple addresses, but one parcel. And across the street, the Republic Cafe and the Lotus Inn, 37 and 39, are also one parcel, but two addresses, and in relatively good condition compared to the other sites. And then 45 was a former two-story building that was demolished after a fire in 2017. And to the south, just back, is the railroad tracks. And then the adjacent streets include California Street, which has the Buddhist temple and the Confucius Church, and then Bridge Alley and Bridge Street, which have a storage unit and a large gravel lot, which is currently under environmental remediation. Next slide. So why did the city choose to undertake the pre-development work? It was a number of reasons. First and foremost, we've had trouble attracting private investment in Chinatown. So by taking the first steps, acquiring the land, preparing any environmental studies, any remediation, preparing a set of plans and having those approved through the planning department, we're taking a lot of the risk off the private sector or the nonprofit developers and creating a site that is ready for financing and building permits. So a lot of the upfront work has been done. The other thing is the community is very interested in the Chinatown Revitalization Plan and the redevelopment of these sites. So we wanted to make sure that they not only had a voice, but really a full seat at the table in this design work, so that we could honor the history of Chinatown, the rich architectural history there. And then finally was to oversee the development of a really successful 100% mixed-use affordable housing site with various incomes from low to median to moderate income, mix of unit types, so you have a dynamic neighborhood, both studios, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms for families, units specific for seniors, and then to have commercial space that's really viable. Oftentimes with mixed-use development, the focus shifts to housing and the commercial side is maybe an afterthought or not fully fleshed out. We wanted to ensure that these sites were built so they'd be primed for success and future tenancy. Next slide. And the photo on the previous slide showed an invitation to a community meeting, which is photographed here. And to date, we've had a number of community meetings, a number of meetings with key stakeholders, like the Salinas Downtown Community Board or the Chinatown Coalition. We've also met specifically with private sector housing developers as well as nonprofit housing developers to ensure the plans we worked on are viable and meet the industry standards, would be attractive to a future RFP. And then we've been working on a number of background supporting studies, market analysis, costing packages, and then finally preparing the environmental document and the actual plans that are being submitted to the planning department for approval, which is where we currently are now, refining the site plans for these sites. Next slide. So generally speaking, the community has been supportive of the approach of mixed-use development, various housing types, and they really wanted to focus on the exterior look of the building, the design features, to make sure it honored the history of Chinatown and the architectural feel, which has a unique blend of Spanish revival, but also Asian architectural influences. So in the next slide, you'll see that TEF spent some time looking at modern examples of 5 to 6 story housing developments, mixed use, ways that you can create an interesting building, but still have it be economical and attractive to a developer, and reflect some of the history of previous architecture, which is featured there in the middle, from San Francisco's Japantown and Chinatown and Los Angeles' Chinatown. Next slide. So for Spanish Revival, some of the key elements we're looking at are the the clay-tiled awnings and roofline, exposed wood brackets, small decorative wall accents, tiles worked within the stucco, for instance. Sidewalk level tile work that contrasts with the stucco and creates a visual change in texture. Some examples nearby include Alvarado Street in Monterey, Lighthouse Street in Monterey, even a recent affordable housing development on the other side of Soledad Street here in Salinas. Next slide. And then for more of the traditional Chinese influences, we're looking at a rich use of red-hued colors, moongate symbolization, decorative awnings, railings that have traditional patterns worked within it. Some examples from Los Angeles, San Francisco, Berkeley there on the side. Next slide. And in particular, focusing on the moongate as a distinguishing aspect of the building. In this design, it is featured as the entryway to the apartments. It is a welcoming and secure entry. It's easy to find. It's inspired by the classic Chinese motif. And it's featured in architecture across the world. Examples there from the Netherlands and Vancouver and San Francisco. It's also featured down the street at the Moongate Apartments, which were developed in 2017-18. And then drawing more inspiration from traditional Japanese joinery techniques and the modern architectural examples is the use of sunshades as a way to break up the massing for a large 5 to 6 story building, add some character, mix in designs within the shades themselves. Next slide. And then not a physical attribute of the building, but a decorative aspect that can be added and changed and updated would be the use of lanterns. Here showing over a communal common area and with examples from Chinatown in San Francisco, a Feast of Lanterns festival, or a Filipino Lantern Festival as well. So strong connections there to the history of Chinatown. Next slide. And then finally, in keeping with the city's public art master plan and the Chinatown revitalization plan, making sure large areas of the building are not just left as vacant stucco, single pane, plain palette colors, but those could be a canvas for local artists and muralists to add their vision to the building. And there are some opportunities highlighted in the photos on the left, and then some local examples of artists here on the right. So this is the initial conceptual view of the redevelopment of these sites. If you're looking down Soledad Street, you can see the current Chinatown Navigation Center at the end of the street, Moongate Apartments on the center right, and then the redevelopment of these two properties, 3440 on the left and 45 on the right. Next slide. And this is sort of a sidewalk perspective looking up towards the southwest. You can see a reconstructed 38 Soledad honoring the historic building that was lost to fire. Even the reconstruction of the original Ayers Pool Hall sign and railing, the railing was actually salvaged after the fire and could be updated and reinstalled to add authenticity. And then the carry through of many of those architectural features through the first floor of the building. So tile awnings, tile at the sidewalk level, warm stucco colors through the first floor. But then avoiding a temptation to have a Chinatown Disneyland effect, as one of the community members said, where the whole building would be overly stylized. The floors 2 through 6 are then purposely done to be more of an modern architectural style. So at the pedestrian level, you're walking through and appreciating the history of Chinatown, but above, you're seeing its rebirth. Next slide. So focusing more specifically at 3440, this is a photograph of the Ayers Pool Hall in its heyday, the 1940s. Pool hall on the first floor, and then a multifamily apartment on the second floor with an entryway to the left. Next slide. So the floor plan for the first floor would be commercial in the dark orange, facing Soledad Street. A light orange would be the common area for the apartments, some offices, and a lobby. And then the gray areas would be for parking, utilities, trash enclosures. Parking would primarily be for employees or ADA for residents who needed that. But otherwise, it would be off-site parking for the residences or expectation of using transit or active transportation. Next slide. The second floor features a mix of studios, which are light blue, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, getting darker in scale, and then a large shared second floor patio, which includes the community room for the apartment complex as well. So separated from the sidewalk for added privacy, this would be an enclosed, semi-enclosed public open space for the residences of the apartment, and with that common community room in the second floor of the Ayers rebuilt pool hall. Next slide. And here, floors 3 through 6 would just be repeated stacked units with studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, and laundry facilities on each floor. Next slide. So in summary, just under 6,000 square feet of commercial, limited parking, but increased bicycle storage, open space and community room totaling a little over 3,500 square feet, and then an even distribution of units between studio 1 and 2 and 3 bedrooms. So here's the rendering of it looking west from Soledad Street, the front of the building. You see the building enclosing the shared common area, the rebuilt historic structure, and then the various types of architectural features between the first floor and the second and sixth floor. And the view from Market Way with some opportunities for artwork, and then the entrance to the parking structure and utility rooms. For 45 Soledad Street, this is a photo of the building before it burned down. The intent here would be to design the first 2 stories in a similar fashion so it replicates the historic structure. Next slide. So again, the commercial would be the dark orange, about 2,000 square feet, and then lighter orange for office and lobby area, gray for utility rooms and a ADA accessible parking space or loading zone. Next slide. Second floor would include the community room and classroom, and then a mix of studios and 1 bedrooms. And then floors 3 through 5, next slide, would be the stacked units for a mix of studios and 1 bedrooms. And for the summary slide, this was intended to be 100% affordable for seniors, so it's built to tax credit standards for seniors, whereas the 34 to 40 is built to tax credit standards for multifamily. With a mix of commercial space, community space, and then an even split, more or less, between studios and 1 bedrooms. Next slide. And the perspective from Market Way looking northeast towards Fremont's Peak. And you can see towards the center of the screen is the Victory Outreach Mission and Republic Cafe, and then the new 45 between the historic rebuild and the first two floors, and then the new architecture above. And then a different perspective from Market Way. And then the final project is the reconstruction, rehabilitation of Republic Cafe, 37 and 39. That is a photo from last fall, but it is an accurate representation of how the building looks today. Next slide. So a bit about the historic nature of the building and why that's important. It is nationally listed on the Register of Nationally Historic Places since 2011. That's because of its role in the community as a significant business, the association with important individuals from the community, the Atai family, and a distinctive example of the architecture at the time in the area. 39 Soledad Street, although connected and in every way looking as though the same building is actually not registered yet, but we did the historic analysis for it, and it is eligible for that based on its heritage and the architecture of the building. And this is important because it affects how you treat the building from a design perspective and how much of an intensification you can do of the site and how much you need to preserve. It also opens opportunity for different funding sources like historic tax credits or grant opportunities through historic foundations. Next slide. And this is an example of what makes it defined historic, what character features it has. So the roof line, the tile work, the signage, the unique tile at the ground level, the railing, the doors and windows. And although they're in poor condition now, they're all still there. So they could be preserved, rehabilitated, and brought back to its former glory. Next slide. So there's two parts to this project. One is an emergency stabilization, which is to save what's there and prevent any more decay. So stabilizing the front of the building, repairing any fire damaged areas from a fire in 2022, installing a fire suppression system so that we don't risk losing the building. Minor stabilization from a seismic standpoint. Overall, the building's solid, but there's always work to be done in older buildings. And then making it watertight and totally sealed up so that no animals and no water can get into the building. Next slide. So that temporary stabilization will really focus on the areas outlined here. What could be saved and preserved would be, but it's likely that through this construction process, it's going to look like a different building temporarily as those are deconstructed and a temporary replacement is put in there. But it's with the aim of bringing it back. So this is a rendering of what it would look like after a complete rehabilitation brought back to its former glory, with the tile work at the ground level, the roof line redone, the brackets updated, and really a nice example of preserved local history. For the interior, the city is in partnership with the Asian Cultural Experience of Salinas on this project. As a condition of buying the property, Salinas is going to work with them to create a cultural museum on the some portion of 37 Soledad Street, the Republic Cafe. So highlighted in pink is the first floor, what could be museum space, meeting space, exhibit halls. And then down below in orange yellow would be the Lotus Inn first floor. It has a large existing bar and could be envisioned here to be continued as a commercial use. So either a restaurant of some type or connected to the museum, a museum cafe, for instance. There's a shared doorway between the two buildings featured there in the middle of the screen. And then some utilities towards the back side of the building accessed off of the alleyway. Next slide. The rear second story portion of the Republic Cafe has a ballroom mezzanine which overlooks the first floor and is featured here with a table as a classroom or gathering area, and then a back portion for storage and archives. Next slide. And then there's an existing single-family apartment, which is historic in nature because it was used for the family that built the building, the Atai family. And so it's a 2-bedroom unit with a central kitchen and a living room facing Soledad Street towards the left of the screen. It's in fairly good condition, so the intent is to rehab it as is and use it as an affordable housing unit. And then down below on the bottom of the screen is the second floor of 39. It had been the Lotus Inn, which was a 14-room hotel or inn, lodge type of use. Here it's shown as unprogrammed. We don't have a tenant in mind yet, but it would have the same basic structure of a central hallway and some type of office use or rooms off to each side of the hallway. And then there is a third floor, or a floor 2.5 in the Republic Cafe, which is a large open room conceived here to be archives or storage, and that has roof access as well. So where we are today, it's February. We're in the middle, towards the end actually, of many of these initiatives, finalizing the site plans for 34 to 40 and 45, and developing construction documents for the stabilization and the rehabilitation of Republic Cafe. Next slide. So the immediate next steps will be preparing to submit 45 Soledad Street for planning, review, and entitlement. We have submitted 3440 for an initial review, and we're working through comments received by the city departments. And so that'll be resubmitted. And once those receive their planning approvals, a request for proposals will be developed, and that'll be released to affordable housing developers to come in and move forward with developing the sites. And then 3739 Soledad Street, currently envisioned to be a city-led project. So we own the building, we have the construction documents for the stabilization and the rehabilitation, and so the city could move forward with doing that, and then interior remodels or finishes might be done by the tenants at a later date. For instance, the ACES Museum would likely want to have their own finishes on the inside. So we'll do the bulk of the work, and then they can do the finishing work. Same for the unprogrammed space in 39. And just one last thing on that slide. You're seeing it's over the same aerial from earlier, but it's imagining what the site would be like. Some of the vacant lots creatively envisioned for garden space, and then the properties we own showing their redevelopment. Next slide. And then a final sort of inspirational view was looking from downtown towards the buildings northeast with Fremont's Peak in the background. You can see how transformative this project would be for that neighborhood. And the look and the feel of the neighborhood would greatly change following its redevelopment, as is envisioned with the Chinatown Revitalization Plan. So with that, happy to take any questions or comments.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Leonard, for the presentation. I do have some questions. Let me go back and through here. Sorry, finding my spot. What was it? On slide 33, with the historic structures report findings on the comparison with the Republic Cafe and the Lotus Inn, what are the next steps to kind of get the Lotus Inn, which is eligible, hasn't yet been designated? Or what are the next steps? Is it until the city completes the whole permitting process that then it's eligible? Or can we go simultaneously through the process? Or is the city simultaneously currently pursuing that?
Right, so now that we have the study in hand showing it's eligible, the way it works in the city, per the city's ordinance for historic structures, is the owner of the building can move forward with designating it. Mm-hmm. In this case, it's the city. Mm-hmm. So it would be up to the city to decide the timing of pursuing designation for it.
And when we say whenever the city decides, who exactly is this? Who are we referring to? Is that like the city council? Like
correct, yeah.
Formal direction from the city council? Okay, mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And then when we're speaking about 37 to 39 Soledad Street and working with ACE to help them fulfill their vision of building out a museum and cultural center down in Soledad Street, what exactly does that look like in terms of ownership and of that property? Will they be a tenant that pays something to the city, like a rent for use of that, or is it provided in kind by the city? And will 37 to 39 kind of be incorporated into library and community services portfolio, or like where does that fall within like the city asset infrastructure?
Yeah, so those are excellent questions and all to be determined.
To be determined. Okay.
So that would be subject to a future lease agreement with mm-hmm. ACES for their use of the property, how much that lease would be, et cetera, how much of the property they would want to lease, if it's just 37 or if it's also 39 or a portion thereof. And then same for 39, if it Is it commercial use? Is it a long-term lease to a tenant? Is it managed through the city property management? If the whole building is some sort of cultural use, is it through LCS? Those are all to be determined at this point.
And then my last question would be in terms of, what do you call it? The keeping the area clean, moving into the future, right? When we look at the initial slides, we look at, I think 3 or 4 of the total sites were burned down over the last couple of years. Are we taking any additional measures to ensure that whatever we build onto those properties will not be impacted in the same way, or, you know, continuing to ensure that the street level appeal of the community is also conducive to living down in that area?
Yes, absolutely. So that's the more complicated, in many ways, a more complicated aspect of this project. So on the homeless services side, there's a number of things moving forward through the Salinas outreach team, SORT, getting people connected to services, potential for service providers to relocate from the area. There's an interest potentially from folks who are on providing services there to relocate, in which case there'd be less reason for folks to be congregating there. Potential to improve the fence line with Union Pacific to avoid people crossing over from the tracks, et cetera. So all of those would be considered, but in general, when a building is occupied on Soledad Street, like Dorothy's, like Moongate, like Victory, it is in good condition. It's not generally vandalized. The problems we see are with the buildings that are vacant. So all the fires, for instance, have happened in vacant buildings. So the sooner we can have these sites activated, occupied, people coming in and out, eyes on the street, the better it'll be overall.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. And then all these projects are very much contingent upon available funding, right? And for the projects that are city-led, I believe in previous discussions on the properties on Soledad Street, something to the effect of us being an entitlement jurisdiction kind of allows us to automatically get a certain set of funds. Can you speak more to that, and then any other additional funding that we're kind of counting on or looking to apply to down the line to keep these projects moving along?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the redevelopment sites, 34 to 40 and 45, I mentioned those have been designed to tax credit standards. So that's the idea, is they'll primarily be funded through state or federal tax credits for development of the sites. And then for 37 and 39, the Republic Cafe and Lotus Inn, those could be a combination of funds. So it could be community development block grants, our federal entitlement, our home funds, permanent local housing allocation. As a historic structure, it could be eligible for historic tax credits and renovation funding, private foundations that finance historic preservation projects, or you know, if the city has local funds eligible as well. So it'll be a combination of funds that get stitched together in all likelihood.
Okay. One last question, promise this is the last one. In terms of the total cost for some of these sites, it was $5 million with $3 million for rehabilitation and $2 million for emergency stabilization. Are these costs typical for projects like this? And when I say projects like this, I mean more historic in nature, more redevelopment properties that maybe need a little bit more tender love and care, right? A little more TLC, rather than if we were redeveloping another property, say in East Salinas or North Salinas, that wasn't under the conditions it's currently in.
Yeah, there are definitely some special factors here for the sites. The historic preservation adds an extra component. You know, you have to look for like product, preserve what you can, so there are extra steps involved in that process. And then there's the nature of the current state of the buildings. They've been uninhabited since the 80s, so they're a greater level of disrepair than a building that's been occupied at that time. But overall, the estimates that are worked up are based off of current time and material value. So the cost of plywood, the cost of stucco, the cost of a carpenter to go out and do it.
Thank you for that. That's all my questions. We'll go ahead and take it out for public comment on this item. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this item? No one in person? Anyone online? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close out this item. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you much.
And with that, the time is now 4:05 p.m., and I will go ahead and adjourn today's meeting.